Hi, I'm Dick Seitz. Welcome to the Software Screw-Up series. This is based on the index entries under screw-ups in my book, The Understanding of Software Dynamics. This is episode 11, Futex inside critical section. This is related to episodes 4 and 5, which also talk about software locks and critical sections. So think about a little kid's sandlot game, and the third base player gets the ball, but then he has to run inside to the bathroom. And without thinking, he ends up taking the ball with him. And so the rest of the game just waits until he comes back with the ball. Contrast that with he remembers to toss the ball back to the pitcher and then runs inside. Then the game can continue without him. Of course, in a sandlot game, somebody else can play third base for a little bit. So you get a similar thing with software using a lock instead of a ball. If you have a critical section that acquires a lock, does some work, does a Futex call to wake up other waiters for the lock, and then releases the lock. Normally you get this sort of sequence. You acquire the lock, do the work, call Futex, and release the lock. Pretty straightforward. But sometimes you'll get this sequence where you acquire the lock, do some work, call Futex, and then bam, a context switch, and you never get to releasing the lock. And so some other thread which woke up here from Futex comes out of Futex, it's Futex, and tries to acquire the lock. It can't get the lock. And it can't get it until this original thread runs again. And that can be milliseconds and milliseconds later. So it's a simple thing. The thing is release the lock first and then wake up any threads that are waiting. So you give the ball back to the pitcher first, release the lock, and then you get the sequence you'd like to have, that you acquire the lock, do some work, release the lock, and then call Futex and wake up others, and then they have a chance to get the lock. This doesn't completely remove the problem. It's possible after releasing the lock to get context switched right before calling Futex, and then it takes a long time to wake up others that are still waiting for the lock. Or you can get context switched after the Futex, or not context switched, but after the Futex, you can come around again and acquire the lock again, which we saw in episode 5. So locking is hard. And so if you have access to a well-designed locking library that avoids a lot of these pitfalls, use that rather than using or writing your own buggy version. Thank you for listening. Welcome and watching. We'll come back with more episodes next week. Thank you for looking at the Software Screw-Up series.